He had no business touching her there. That is what it looked like. But the truth was, he was trying to keep the rope from tearing her open. That was the first thing any man would think if they came riding over the rise and saw him like that. A giant Apache girl lay face down in the burned summer grass, her legs forced apart by the ropes, ankles tied to two cleanings, cut stakes driven deep into the earth. Dust clung to her skin where sweat had dried. The rope bit hard into her ankles, pulled so tight it lifted her hips just off the ground, and Evan Cutter had both hands under her upper thighs. He was 49, broad-shouldered, weather-cut, the kind of rancher folks trusted without asking why. But right now, trust would have died fast because his palms were braced against her inner legs, lifting just enough to see where the damage was, and his eyes were locked on the injury, high on her inner thigh, where blood had darkened the dust. From a distance, it looked wrong. Up close, it was worse. The wound sat high on her inner leg, raw and swollen, where rope and gravel had rubbed until flesh gave way. Every time Evan shifted her weight to ease the pull on her ankles, her body jerked in pain. Her breath came sharp and fast. Shoulders trembling, teeth clenched like she refused to give the desert the sound of her suffering. She was big, bigger than most men Evan knew, built for mountains, not mercy. But right now she was pinned low, forced open, displayed in a way meant to break something inside her long before it broke the body. Evan leaned closer, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, trying to judge how deep the rope had cut. If he lifted her leg wrong, he could tear her open even worse. If he didn't lift it at all, the rope would keep sawing every time she breathed. He adjusted his grip, careful but firm, and that was when her voice finally came apart. "Don't. It still hurts there," she said. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They hit him like a hand to the chest. Evan froze, not because she begged, but because she wasn't begging him to stop helping. She was begging him not to touch the place where pain had already stolen enough from her. Her legs shook beneath his hands, not weakness. Control barely held. For one suspended moment, everything balanced on what he did next. The wrong move would turn him into exactly what the world expected a man to be. When a woman was tied down and alone, the valley lay silent around them. Stretched along the San Pedro River, July heat pressing down like a judgment, a distant windmill squealed once, then went quiet, and the taste of old coffee sat bitter in his mouth. The grass hissed softly in the wind. A hawk circled high, patient. Evan slowly eased his hands away. Not fast, not dramatic like a man unloading a gun he didn't want to fire. He shifted back onto his heels and forced space between them. The kind of space that says, "I see you." The kind that says, "I won't decide for you." The girl dragged in a breath and held it as if she didn't trust relief yet. Her eyes stayed wide, dark, sharp, watching him like an animal that had learned what hands could do. Evan glanced at her wrists then, and his stomach tightened. They weren't bound. Whoever had done this wanted her arms free, wanted her to be able to reach, wanted her to feel every choice. That was when Evan looked at the stakes again. Not just at the rope, but at the wood itself. They weren't crooked branches, they weren't hurried, they were straight post, cut clean, driven deep, spaced even fence posts. The kind of man set when he wanted something seen, something marked. This wasn't panic, this was intention. Evan reached slowly for his belt, and her entire body tensed hard, like a bow pulled to its limit for a heartbeat. The desert held its breath. Then he pulled free his knife. He turned it in his hand once and laid it on the ground beside her, handle toward her fingers, close enough to reach far enough that she had to choose to take it. He set his canteen down next to it, then a clean, folded cloth. He didn't speak. Words had weight here, and she'd already been crushed by enough of them. Evan stood and turned his back to her, facing the empty shimmer of heat rolling off the plain. He angled his body so his shadow fell across her, cutting the sun from her eyes. Behind him, the rope creaked softly as she shifted. He heard metal scrape dirt. He heard a low grunt that never turned into a cry. Evan did not turn around. The first rope gave way with a dry snap. The second took longer. Her breathing stayed controlled. Each cut measured like she was carving herself out of the ground, inch by inch. When her ankles finally came free, her body dropped, not collapsing, but surrendering the strain it had been forced to hold. Silence followed. Not a threatening silence, a different one. The kind that settles after something terrible is ended. But before anyone knows what comes next, Evan heard the canteen open. The first swallows were harsh and angry, then slower, steadier. At last, a deliberate cough. That was his signal. He turned. The Apache girl sat upright against the scorched grass, spine straight, despite the pain. Cloth pressed high on her inner thigh. Her face was pale under the dust, but her eyes were clear now, alert, unbroken. Heaven met her gaze and gave a single nod. No apology to no claim. Only then did he realize the truth settling heavy in his chest. If someone planted her here like this, in a place a rider was bound to pass, then this wasn't just about her suffering. It was a message. And whoever planted that message did not have to be Apache. In this territory, cruelty wore many faces, and money taught men new sins. Whoever did this wore a white man's cruelty, not Apache. And whoever sent it hadn't finished speaking yet. He heard it then, not loud, but wrong. A faint clink out in the grass like a bit hitting stone. Evan held still, eyes on the horizon, but his hand drifted near his belt by instinct. Somewhere close, a horse shifted its weight. Not his horse, a hidden rider. Watching the scene play out, Ka heard it too. Her head turned a fraction, and her eyes narrowed like she was counting breaths in the brush. Evan understood in that moment why her wrists had been left free. This was not only meant to hurt her, it was meant to test the man who found her, to see if he would cross a line when nobody was looking. Evan backed toward his horse without turning fully, and he kept his voice low. "We leave now," he said. Ka did not answer. She just tightened her grip on the res, and they moved him. If this wasn't meant to punish her, then who was she really left here for? And what would happen to the man who chose not to look away? He didn't ask her name. Not then. Names have weight, and weight was the last thing she needed on her chest. Evan Cutter led his horse closer, slow enough that even the flies didn't scatter. He kept his eyes level, not on the wound, not on her body, but on her face, so she could see exactly where his attention was. She watched him like a hawk watches a snake, calm on the outside, ready underneath. "You can ride if you want," he said. His voice was low, steady, the kind men use when they don't want to scare a spooked animal. "If you don't, we'll sit right here till the sun moves." She tested her legs. One knee dipped. Her jaw tightened. No sound came out. Evan didn't rush. Men rush when they're trying to feel useful. He waited, hands loose at his sides. After a long breath, she placed her palm on his forearm. Not a plea, not a grab, just a measured decision. She was heavier than she looked, solid as a fence post, and Evan felt it in his bones. This wasn't someone the desert had made weak. This was someone the desert had tried and failed to finish. They moved slow. Step, pause, another step. When she was finally in the saddle, Evan handed her the reins first. That wasn't politeness. That was respect. They rode ease. Away from the post, away from the message planted in the dirt. Evan didn't look back. He already knew those stakes weren't meant to be forgotten. The ride took longer than it should have, not because of distance, but because pain doesn't move on a clock. The girl sat straight, despite it, shoulders squared, eyes forward. She didn't slump, didn't lean into him, didn't ask for help. She hadn't decided to accept. They reached his ranch just as the light softened. the worst of the heat easing its grip. A low place near Benson, tucked where the wind broke against a rise of rock. Nothing fancy, small house, a corral, a pump that complained every time it worked. Evan helped her down. Careful, all business. She stood on her own once her boots hit the dirt. That mattered to her, he could tell. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and coffee grounds. The windmill out back creaked on its lazy turns, and the coffee was black and bitter, the way old men liked it when they had too much to think about. The kind of place time moved through slow and honest. Evan set a skillet on the stove and cracked an egg with one hand, trying to make the morning look normal. It was not normal. Car's eyes never stopped measuring the room. She kept her boots on, even inside, like she expected to run without warning. When Evan reached for a coil of rope on a nail by the door, her shoulders jumped hard. Not. Fear like a child, a reflex like a fighter. Evan quietly took the rope down and set it outside, far from the house, like he was moving a rattlesnake with a shovel. He did not mention it. He just poured coffee into 2 tin cups and slid one toward her. She did not drink it, but she wrapped her hands around the cup for warmth, and for the first time, Evan saw her fingers stop shaking. Evan set water on the table, then stepped back like he'd done outside. She drank, not fast now, measured. "You got a place you want to be?" he asked. "No one's chasing us yet." She shook her head once. That was enough. That first night, she didn't lie down. She sat against the wall, knees drawn just enough to guard herself, eyes never fully closing. Evan noticed. He said nothing. He slept light, too. Old habit, old mistakes. In the morning, he brought her clean water and a bit of bread. She ate slow, watching him the whole time. On the second day, he saw her flinch when the wind rattled a loose rope by the corral. Just a twitch, but it told him more than words would have. He noticed other things, too. The way she checked the horizon without turning her head, the way her hands rested, ready even when she was still, and the way she touched the small piece of stitched leather hidden beneath her shirt when she thought he wasn't looking. Evan didn't ask about it. Men who ask too early don't get told the truth. That afternoon, he found tracks along the far fence, fresh, sure, not drifting, placed. Someone had come close enough to look, close enough to know she was alive that night. She spoke for the first time. "They didn't leave me there to die," she said. Her voice was deep, steady, worn in a way young voices shouldn't be. "They left me to be found." Evan leaned back in his chair, listening. "They wanted a man," she went on. "A man who would stop, a man who would choose." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. Evan thought of the posts again, straight, measured, set where a rider would pass. He thought of the way her wrists had been left free, the way pain had been made part of the choice. "Someone wanted to see what kind of man you were," he said. Her eyes met his, or what kind you would become. They sat with that for a while. The fire popped once. The house settled outside. A horse snorted. Not his. Evan stood calm but ready. He looked out through the window, scanning the dark. No rider came into view. Not yet. Whoever was behind this wasn't finished. They were patient, and patient men were dangerous. Evan sat back down slower this time. He poured a little more water into her cup. "You're safe here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we'll see what kind of trouble followed you home." She nodded, not grateful. Certain, before the fire burned low, she finally said her name. Just one word, soft like it was still deciding whether to stay. "Car." Evan repeated it once, then let it rest. Evan almost asked where she was from, almost asked who did it, but he had learned something over the years. If you press a wounded person for a story, you are not helping. You are collecting. So he asked the only question that mattered. "Do you want the door barred tonight?" Carr looked at the lock, then at the window, then back at him. She gave one slow nod. Evan slid the bolt into place, and the sound was small, but it changed the air in the room. Outside, the wind picked up and carried a faint sound across the yard. Leather creaking, a saddle shifting, then nothing. Kaya's eyes lifted, and Evan knew whoever was out there had not gone far. And if that sound in the yard made your skin tighten, you already understand why this is not over. Now, friend, if you're still here, that tells me something. If this story is keeping you company, consider subscribing so I know to keep the fire lit. Nothing loud, nothing fancy, just a quiet click. And while you listen, pour yourself some tea, take a breath, and let me know in the comments what time it is, where you are, and where you're listening from. We've got a long road ahead, and the next visitor to this ranch won't be coming in peace. Morning came thin and pale, the kind that makes you feel watched, even when nothing moves. Evan was all ready, up, sitting at the small table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He had slept light, like a man who knows the past has learned his address. Kaya stirred just after dawn. She rose slow, testing herself the way a working animal does, careful not to show pain. The cloth on her inner thigh was darkened again, but not soaked. That was a good sign. Not a safe one, just good. Evan noticed she kept her back to the wall while she moved. People do that when they expect trouble to come through the door. He handed her fresh water. She nodded once and drank. Neither of them talked about the tracks he'd found. Silence can be a kind of agreement. Outside, the ranch woke up the way it always did, a horse shifting weight, wood popping as the air warmed, a crow calling from the fence line like it knew something. Evan stepped out to check the perimeter. The tracks were still there, pressed clean into the dirt. Shod hooves, 2 riders, they had not crossed the fence. They had come close enough to see the house, close enough to know she was alive. That was not good. Back inside, Kaya watched him read the ground from the doorway. She did not ask what he saw. She already knew. And that little stitched pouch under her shirt. It had more than fear in it. It had ink, names, and a mark that did not belong to her people. By midday, the heat came down hard, the kind that drains patience from AM. Evan fixed a loose board on the corral, slow and steady, more to keep his hands busy than because it needed fixing. That was when the riders showed themselves. They stopped just beyond the fence. 2 men on horses that were too clean for honest work. One tall and narrow, the other broader, with a relaxed seat that came from knowing he did not have to hurry. Evan recognized the type before he recognized the face. The taller man stayed back. The broader one rode forward alone, stopping short of the fence like he was respecting a rule he did not believe in. He smiled easy. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice carried the calm of someone who expected to be obeyed. Evan did not answer right away. He rested one hand on the fence rail and waited. "We are looking for a woman," the man continued. "Big girl, hurt leg, belongs with us." Evan felt Kaya behind him, close enough to hear everything. "She does not belong to anyone," Evan said. The man smiled wider, like he had expected that answer. That is where folks get confused. He reached into his coat and pulled out folded papers. Not a badge, not a warrant, just papers. "Missing property," he said. "Signed in tombstone, proper enough for men who understand how things work." Evan took a step closer to the fence. He did not take the papers. "What is your name?" Evan asked. The man hesitated just a beat too long. "Haron Voss." That told Evan everything. H.E. needed to know. Voss was a man who worked the space between law and violence. The kind hired when someone wanted their hands clean and their conscience quiet. Behind Evan, Kaya moved. She stepped into view, not hiding, not defiant, just present. Voss looked at her, and his eyes flicked down, quick and practiced, to the bandaged leg, then back to her face. "You should not have run," he said to her. His tone was mild, almost kind. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. "She is hurt," Evan said. "She is staying until she can walk." Voss shrugged. "That is not your call." One of the horses snorted. The other man shifted in his saddle. Voss leaned forward slightly. "You got a reputation, Cutter," he said. "Quiet man. Fair folks like that." Evan did not like the way his name sounded in Voss's mouth. "Hand her over now," Voss went on, "and this ends clean. Wait too long, and it gets complicated." That was when the taller man moved. He swung down from his horse and stepped forward, crossing the fence line like it was nothing. His hand went out toward Carr, fast and careless. Evan did not think. He moved. His fist landed hard and low, a short punch that dropped the man before he knew what had happened. No flourish, no warning. The second man came up swearing. Evan met him halfway. A shove, a knee, the sound of breath leaving a body. It was over quick, the way real fights are. Voss never his gun. He just watched, eyes sharp, measuring. Evan stood between him and Carr, breathing steady. Voss shook his head slowly. "That was a mistake," he said. "Now you made this personal." He turned his horse and rode off, leaving his men scrambling to follow. The dust hung in the air long after they were gone. Evan closed the gate and leaned on it for a moment. Not tired, thinking. Inside, Kaya sat back down, controlled but pale. "They will come back," she said. "Yes," Evan answered, "and next time they will not ask." She studied him, then really looked at him, at the old lines in his face, at the way his hand stayed loose even now. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Most men would not." Evan exhaled slowly. "'Cause I learned once what happens when you let other people decide who gets taken." She nodded, like that fit something she already knew. The afternoon stretched on. Too quiet. Somewhere past the wash, a coyote yipped once, then went silent, like even it knew better than to talk too much. As the sun dipped, Evan pulled a piece of paper from a drawer. He sat at the table and stared at it longer than he liked to admit. Some fights you cannot win with fists. Some you cannot avoid by staying quiet. Kyle watched him write, her hand resting near the small stitched leather she still carried close outside. The wind shifted, and far off beyond the ranch, another rider turned toward them. Evan, D just made his choice. The question was not whether trouble was coming. It was how much it was going to cost him when it arrived. The paper stayed blank longer than Evan liked. He sat at the table with the pen resting between his fingers, staring at the grain in the wood like it might tell him what kind of man he still was. Carr watched from the far side of the room. She did not hover. She did not interrupt. She had learned long ago when silence was safer than words outside. The light shifted. Late afternoon settling in. Shadows stretching across the yard. The heat easing just enough to let a man think again. Evan finally wrote, "Not much, no pleading, no long story, just names, places, and one line that mattered. I am sheltering a woman who cannot safely return. If you remember what you owe me, stand up now." He folded the paper slow and slid it into his coat. He had not written a letter like that in years. The kind that did not ask for help, but demanded a choice. "I'm going to town," he said. Kaya looked up. Her eyes went to the door, then to her leg. "You are not," he added. "Not yet." She studied his face, measuring risk like she always did. Then she nodded. Evan saddled the horse as the sun dipped lower. He rode hard toward Tombstone, dust lifting behind him like a signal he did not care to hide. The town met him the way it always did. There was an old gun smell in the air, iron and oil mixed with sweat and sawdust, wood and noise, and men who pretended they were in control of something. Horses tied tight, voices sharp, a smell of sweat and whiskey baked into the boards. Evan dismounted slow and walked straight down the street. He did not stop at the saloon. He did not look around. He went where the law was supposed to live. The office was small and hot. A deputy sat behind the desk, sleeves rolled, expression tired. He looked up when Evan stepped in. Recognition flickered, then caution. "You picked a bad week," the deputy said. Evan set the folded paper on the desk, but did not push it forward. "I'm not here for favor," Evan said. "I'm here so you can decide what kind of man you are." The deputy snorted quietly. "That is a heavy load to bring into a room like this." Evan met his eyes. "You already carry it." The deputy leaned back and studied him. Studied the dust on his boots, the set of his shoulders. "Is it true," the deputy asked, "that you laid out 2 of Voss's boys today?" Evan did not answer. He did not need to. The deputy sighed and rubbed his face. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "There are names you do not stand against alone." Evan pushed the paper forward now. The deputy read it once. Then again, his jaw tightened. "You should not have come," he said quietly. "That bad," Evan replied. "That bad," the deputy confirmed. "Boss works F. Or Mallory. Mallory owns more cattle than this town owns souls." Evan nodded. He had suspected as much. "There is talk," the deputy continued, "about a woman, about an Apache girl who saw something she was not meant to see." Evan felt the room close in just a little. "She's hurt," Evan said. "She is not property." The deputy stood and crossed to the window. He looked out at the street like he was checking for ghosts. "If you stay here," he said, "you and that girl will disappear. Not tonight." Not loud, just gone. Evan folded the paper and tucked it back into his coat. "Then I will be gone before that," he said. The deputy turned back. His eyes held something close to regret. "You were a good man once," he said. Evan paused at the door. "Still am," he replied. "I just learned where quiet leads." Outside, the sky had turned the color of old brass. Evan mounted up and rode without stopping. By the time he reached the edge of town, another rider fell in beside him. An older man, lean, eyes sharp. "You picked a dangerous road," the man said. "So did you," Evan answered. They rode together until the road split. "Go north," the man said. "Keep to the rocks, D. They will not expect that." Evan nodded once and turned. Night had fallen by the time he reached the ranch. The house was dark, too dark. He dismounted slow, hand near his side, listening. A low sound drifted from inside. Not a voice. A.S. Truggle held back. Evan pushed the door open. Kaya stood near the wall, breathing hard. Her hand was clenched around the small stitched leather she carried. The lamp lay broken on the floor. "They came back," she said. "Just one. He did not expect me to be standing." Evan took her in quick and careful. No fresh blood, no rope. "Did he see you?" Evan asked. She shook her head. "He was looking for you." Evan closed the door and barred it. The night outside felt closer now, like it was listening. Ka met his gaze. "They will not stop," she said. "No," Evan replied. "They will escalate." He poured water and set it in her hands. "We leave at first light," he said. "Not to run, to face this where witnesses exist." Her brow furrowed. "Tombstone did not help you," she said. "No," Evan answered. "But Charleston might." She studied him, then nodded slowly. The fire burned low as they sat in silence, each of them listening to the land. Somewhere out there, plans were being made. Evan thought he was heading toward help. He did not yet know that Charleston was where the trap was finally meant to close. They left before the sun showed its face, not because Evan liked moving in the dark, but because daylight gives men confidence, and confidence was what their enemies fed on. Ka rode behind him at first, then beside him. Once the trail widened, she sat straight in the saddle, legs stiff but steady, the kind of posture that said pain had been accepted, not surrendered to. Evan watched her from the corner of his eye, not hovering, just enough to know if she slipped. They took the rocky route north, away from the open flats. An older writer's advice echoed in Evan's head. Keep to the rocks. Men who think they own the land forget the places that do not make money. The Dragoon Mountains rose ahead of them, dark shapes cutting into the pale morning. The trail narrowed, forcing them single file. Dust hung low, slow to settle. Neither of them talk much. Words tend to wear out when the ground starts to tilt. After an hour, Kaya slowed her horse. She raised one hand, palm down. Evan stopped without asking why. She leaned slightly in the saddle, eyes scanning the rocks above the trail. Her breathing stayed even, but something had sharpened in her face. "They are close," she said. Not loud, certain. Evan slid down from his horse and checked the ground. Fresh prints, more than two this time. Careful spacing. Men who knew how to move without wasting effort. Voss had learned. They pushed on anyway. Turning back would only make things easier for the men behind them. The first shot cracked against stone, sharp and ugly. It missed, but not by much. Evan moved fast, grabbing Car's reins and pulling both horses off the trail into a cut between rocks. Another shot rang out closer. They dismounted and est into the shadow, hearts working but minds clear. Kaya crouched low, steadying herself against the stone. She did not panic. She did not freeze. Evan noticed that, and something quiet in him settled. Boots scraped rock above them. Voices carried low and controlled. "Take him alive," one man said. "The girl matters less." That line burned. Evan waited until a shadow crossed the edge of the cut. Then he surged forward, driving his shoulder into the man's middle. They went down hard, breath knocked loose. Another man rushed in. Evan caught him with a short punch to the jaw. Felt bone, give just enough. The fight was messy and close, and no grand moves, and just weight and grit, and timing. Car moved too, not into the middle of it, but around. She picked up a fallen rock and brought it down on her wrist, reaching for a gun. Once enough, the men fell back, swearing. One went down the slope, sliding until he hit hard. Voss did not show himself, not yet. Evan grabbed the horses. "We keep moving," he said. Ah, they will not stop. They rode hard through the pass, stones clattering under hooves, breath burning in lungs. Behind them, shouts rose, then faded. They did not slow until the land opened again. By midday, the heat returned. Car's leg had stiffened. Evan could see it in the way she shifted weight. They stopped in the shade of a stand of scrub. Evan offered water. She drank, then surprise. Ed him. "This was never just about me," she said. He waited. "They wanted you," she continued, "from the start." Evan frowned. "Why me?" She reached inside her shirt and pulled out the small stitched leather pouch, the one she guarded like breath. She opened it and tipped the contents into her palm, a folded scrap of paper, worn soft. She handed it to him. Evan unfolded it slowly. Names, numbers, routes, cattle counts that did not line up, and, at the bottom, a foreman's signature and a stamped mark from Marla's own office. Mallory's hand was all over it. Carr said it plain, like she was reading weather. "I saw how they trapped folks, not always with chains, with debt papers, false charges, and men who looked away." Evan felt the weight of it settle. This was not a crime of anger. It was a system and the post. He said, "They wanted me to find you." She nodded. "You were known. Quiet, fair, a man who would stop." Evan exhaled slowly. "They thought I would bring you into it." "Yes," Carr said, "and then disappear." They mounted again, riding toward Charleston. The town sat near the river, busy enough for witnesses, crooked enough for deals. They reached the outskirts as the sun dipped. Smoke rose from chimneys, voices carried. Evan felt eyes on them before he saw anyone. They had made it. but too cleanly. As they rode down the main stretch, a group of men stepped out from between buildings, not runny. NG, waiting. Voss stood among them now, calm, smiling like a man who had finally been proven right. "Evening, Cutter," he said, right on time. Evan's hand tightened on the rest. Kaya leaned forward slightly, eyes scanning, counting. They were surrounded, not trapped, but boxed in. Boss tipped his hat. "Let us finish this proper," he said. Evan had ridden into Charleston looking for witnesses. What he found instead was a stage already set, and this time there was no clear way off it. Voss stood there smiling, certain the stage belonged to him. Men like that always believe the ending has already been written. Evan did not reach for his gun. Not yet. He felt the weight of the street instead. The doors, the windows. Oh, the people watching without stepping forward. Witnesses, whether they wanted to be or not. Kaya dismounted first. That surprised everyone. She moved slow, careful with her leg, but she did not shrink. She did not stand behind Evan. She stood beside him, not as property, not as a shield, as a person who had decided she would no longer be placed. Voss tilted his head. "This ends simple," he said. "You come back with us," and he walks away. Carr looked at Evan once, just once, no fear in it, no request. Then she turned back to Voss. "No," she said. The word did not echo. It did not need to. It landed heavy enough on its own. The street felt different after that. Not louder, clearer. Evan finally spoke. "She's done being moved around to make other men comfortable." Voss laughed, sharp and hollow. "You think words matter here?" Evan nodded. "They always do. Someone just has to say the right ones where others can hear." Carr reached into her shirt and brought out the worn scrap of paper. She held it up where the light could catch it. She did not explain it. She did not accuse. She just let it be seen. Men in the crowd shifted, not brave, just uneasy. A storekeeper squinted at the names. Then his face changed so. He whispered one name. His brother-in-law, caught in the same debt trap last year. A cattle hand swallowed hard because he recognized the stamp too. And just like that, the crowd was not on Voss's side. It was on its own hide. Nobody cheered. Nobody turned into a hero. But a deputy in the shade went still because he recognized the stamped mark, and he knew it could reach a judge, and it could reach a newspaper too. Boss took a step forward, trying to snatch it. His hand dipped toward his gun for a heartbeat, and every man on that street felt how close blood was. That was his mistake. The deputy finally moved, not out of courage, but out of fear that the truth would come back and hang him later. Voss saw it too late. The guns never came out. They did not need to. By the time it ended, Voss was standing alone, his smile gone, his certainty stripped away. Mal. Larry's name would be spoken out loud now, and he would not fall. In a day, men like Mallory had money, lawyers, and friends. But once a name is spoken in daylight, it never sits as comfortably in the dark again. And spoken names have a way of changing futures. Evan and Carr left Charleston before sunset. No cheers followed them, just space. Evan did not ride out whole. A graze on his ribs burned with every breath, and by the time he got home, 2 head of cattle were gone, taken as a message. Doing right did not pay clean. It just paid honest. The ride back was quieter than the ride in, not because the danger had vanished, but because something heavier had lifted. They did not talk much. They did not need to. Back at the ranch, life returned to small things. Fence boards, water drawn slow, meals eaten without hurry. Carr healed the way strong people do. Owned the not fast, but honestly. She stayed because she chose to, not because she had nowhere else. Not because Evan offered protection, because here she was not reduced. But Evan did not promise anything, that he did not ask for gratitude. He simply made space and kept it open. Over time, something settled between them. Not the loud kind of love that needs witnesses, the quiet kind that grows from respect, repeated every day. Now, let me step out of the dust for a moment and speak to you directly. When I first came across stories like this, what struck me was never the violence. It was always the pauses, the moments when someone could have taken control and chose not to. I have learned this the hard way in my own life. Strength is not proven when you act. It is proven when you stop yourself from acting for the wrong reasons. How many times have we stepped in too fast, thinking we were helping, only to realize later we took something away from someone who needed to stand on their own? How many relationships, how many families, how many good intentions fell apart, not because of cruelty, but because of control, disguised as care? This story stays with me because Evan did not save Kaya by lifting her up. He saved her by stepping back. And Kaya did not become strong because someone protected her. She became strong because someone finally respected her. No. Some of the biggest damage in a family comes from control, dressed up as protection. So ask yourself, who in your life needs your help, and who needs your hands, and who needs your restraint? It made them a reminder that love built on choice lasts longer than love built on fear, that respect creates loyalty deeper than control ever could, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is nothing at all. If the story meant something to you, I would appreciate a like. It tells me these quiet lessons still matter. And if you want more stories like this, stories meant to slow you down just enough to think, consider subscribing. No rush, just when it feels right. Before you go, take a moment. Ask yourself where you might need to step back instead of stepping in, and where someone in your life might be waiting for space instead of advice. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. And remember, the strongest people are not the ones who hold others in place, but the ones who allow them to.